She'd always imagined her wedding day would feel like stepping into a storybook, sunlight streaming through the windows of the old hall, flowers spilling down the aisle in soft pastels, her closest people gathered in rows to watch her promise forever to the one person who had never let her down. And for a while, it was exactly that. Her dress fit perfectly. Her mother dabbed tears from her eyes as she walked her down the aisle. Her soon-to-be husband squeezed her hand so tightly that for a moment she forgot how her knees trembled. The reception was the part she'd looked forward to most, the laughter, the dancing, the sense that all the rough edges of life had been softened, if only for one night. So when she walked into the reception hall, fingers laced with her new husband's, she felt so full she thought her chest might burst. People rose from their chairs to cheer for them. Champagne glasses clinked. Her sister, of course, stood right in the center, the maid of honor, her best friend since childhood, the one she trusted to make this day perfect. She should have known better. She'd always ignored the way her sister liked to test boundaries, how she found it hilarious to stir up old wounds, just to watch her squirm. "It's just a joke," she'd say whenever she crossed the line. And the family always laughed it off, like that was her charm. She was mid-conversation with her aunt when she caught a glimpse of him. At first she thought her eyes were playing tricks, surely it was just someone who looked like him. But there he was, leaning against the bar with that smug grin she'd once fallen for and spent 3 long years trying to forget. Her ex. The man who had left her for someone else the week after he'd moved in with her. The one who had looked her dead in the eye and told her, "You're not enough for me," like he was doing her a favor by admitting it. The room suddenly felt too warm. She excused herself and ducked behind the curtain near the bar, her breath catching in her throat. Her husband found her there a minute later, concern etched into his face. "What's wrong?" he asked, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. She could barely form the words. "He's here. My ex, he's here." "Who invited him?" He frowned, peeking over her shoulder. "No idea. I mean, the guest list came from your side, right?" Her mind raced. She'd double-checked every name. She'd told her sister specifically, no surprises. No old ghosts. Her sister had laughed, flipping through the spreadsheet, promising, "Of course, sis. It's your day. I'd never do anything to ruin it." She felt a surge of anger so sharp it made her dizzy. She slipped out from behind the curtain and forced herself to walk calmly across the room. Her sister was near the cake table, laughing with a couple of distant cousins, her glass of bubbly lifted high like a queen's scepter. When she saw her approach, her grin widened. "Hey, bride. Why so serious? You should be dancing." She didn't lower her voice. She didn't care who heard. "What is he doing here?" Her sister blinked, wide-eyed and fake innocent. "Who?" "Don't play dumb." "My ex." "Why is he here?" Her sister sipped her drink, one shoulder lifting in a careless shrug. "Oh, come on. He's harmless. It's just a bit of fun, old friends, old memories. He wanted to wish you well. Don't be such a drama queen." She felt her mouth go dry. "You invited him? After everything he did to me?" Her sister's eyes gleamed, just for a second. "Well, he was always charming. You two were cute together. I always thought you gave up on him too soon." It was like the floor dropped out from under her feet. The clink of glasses, the laughter, the music, it all blurred into a dull roar behind her temples. She forced herself to look her sister dead in the eye, and in that moment, she saw it for what it was, not a joke. Not a mistake. But a deliberate, quiet twist of the knife, a reminder that her sister had always liked to test just how much she'd let slide. But this time, she thought as she clenched her fists by her sides, she wouldn't let it slide. This time, her sister would learn what it felt like to stand at an altar and watch someone you trust smile while they ruin you from the inside out. She didn't even touch her wedding cake. Later, people would ask her why there were photos of her slicing it but none of her taking a bite. She'd smile and say she wasn't hungry, but the truth was, the moment she tasted betrayal on her tongue, everything else turned to ash. She managed to dance, at least for the cameras. She pressed her cheek to her new husband's shoulder while he whispered, "Ignore him. He doesn't matter. This is our day." And she tried, really, she did. But every time she glanced over her husband's shoulder, she saw her ex at the bar, grinning like he'd won something. And next to him, her sister, toasting him with that same too-wide smile, as if she'd brought him in like a guest of honor. When the last guest stumbled out into the night, when the band packed up their instruments and the florist came to gather the leftover blooms, she cornered her sister behind the banquet hall. The fairy lights cast a soft glow over the empty tables, making the place look like the dream she'd planned, now soured. Her sister was leaning against the railing, heels dangling from her fingers, already tipsy on the free champagne she'd gulped down all night. "What's with the face?" she slurred. "Come on, lighten up. It was just a bit of fun." She crossed her arms tight over her chest, wedding dress crumpling under her elbows. "He wasn't on the guest list. I told you no surprises. You looked me in the eye and promised." Her sister rolled her eyes so hard it made her stomach twist. "Oh, grow up. He texted me, said he heard about the wedding, wanted to make amends. You're so dramatic about these things. He's not your enemy, you were engaged for 2 years. Besides," she added with a sly grin, "I always thought he was more your type than the guy you married." It was a slap without the sting of a palm. The kind that cuts deeper because you realize the hand was always there, waiting for your guard to drop. Her sister had always known how to twist the blade. Little digs, little reminders, you're not as special as you think you are. She stepped closer, so close she could smell the cheap wine on her sister's breath. "Did you tell him where it was? The venue, the time, you gave him everything." Her sister laughed, not even trying to deny it. "I did him a favor. I did you a favor. Maybe you needed a reminder of where you came from. You're not so perfect. He was your first, after all. You never really get over that, do you?" Her fists clenched so tightly she felt her nails dig crescents into her palm. "Do you hear yourself? You invited the man who lied to me, who cheated on me, who nearly broke me, to my wedding." Her sister's expression turned cold, lips curling into that familiar smirk. "Don't act like you're so innocent. You've always acted like you're better than me. You got the sweet husband, the big wedding, the family fussing over you. I just wanted to even the score. And that was it, the truth, laid bare under the fairy lights and the fading music drifting from the hall. It wasn't about a joke. It wasn't about an old friend. It was about control, the cheap thrill of pulling strings and watching her squirm. She stepped back, exhaling slow. The rage didn't roar anymore, it went quiet, cold, steady. The way her father used to say, "Keep your voice calm when you fight. It's the quiet ones they never see coming." Her sister slipped her shoes back on, already bored. "Relax. It's done. You're married. Go enjoy your honeymoon. You'll get over it." She watched her sister strut back inside, the grin back in place, arms thrown around her clueless husband who waited by the door with their coats. He pressed a kiss to her sister's cheek like she was the most loyal woman in the world. And that's when she knew exactly how she'd make this right. Her sister liked to drag ghosts into people's happiest days, but she was about to learn what it felt like when someone you trust drags the truth into yours. The honeymoon was short. Not because they hadn't dreamed of someplace far away, they had. But after the wedding night, she felt an ache deep in her bones, like something inside her needed tending before she could sip drinks on a beach and pretend the world was perfect. Her husband didn't ask questions when she said she wanted to come home early. He just held her hand on the plane, kissed her temple, and said, "I trust you. Do what you need to do." The night they returned, she sat cross-legged on the floor of the small spare room they'd turned into an office. The wedding cards were still in neat stacks, tied with white ribbon. The leftover confetti spilled from her purse like broken promises. And right there in the corner, buried under an old notebook, was her old phone, the one she'd used back when she and her ex had been together. She hadn't looked at it in years, but something in her chest told her it was time. She plugged it in, watched the black screen flicker awake. Notifications rolled in like a slow wave, old group chats, spam, junk she'd long forgotten. But then she saw it, messages from her sister. A chain that went back further than she wanted to believe. The first ones were harmless. Little jabs about her dating life, asking if she and her ex were serious. Then they turned sharper. I don't get why you're wasting time on him. He flirts with me more than you, haha. Or, don't be mad, I'm just being honest. He said you're too boring for him sometimes. Maybe loosen up? She scrolled through them, her heart pounding harder with each line. She saw the ones from after the breakup, too, her sister and her ex laughing about the drama, how easy it was to push her buttons. And there it was, the photo that stopped her cold. A selfie of the two of them in a bar, a date stamped 3 months after she'd cut him off for good. Her sister's hair draped over his shoulder like a trophy. Her stomach turned, but she forced herself to keep reading. The most recent messages were like poison seeping through an old wound. So, when's the wedding? I might crash, winking face he'd written. And her sister's response, do it. She'll flip. She always was a drama queen. Maybe I'll see you there. Maybe not. We'll see who notices. She pressed her palm against her forehead, fighting the tears that wanted to come. She'd always believed family was family, that her sister's sharp tongue was just a quirk, not a dagger. But it wasn't an accident. Her sister hadn't just invited him to watch her squirm, she'd kept the door open for him to slip back in, laughing behind her back all along. She pulled her knees to her chest, feeling the ache of it settle deep in her bones. Then, through the fog of betrayal, she thought about the man who'd stood by her side that night. Not her ex. Not her husband, but her sister's husband. Sweet, loyal, clueless about the snake coiled in his bed. She thought of the Christmas dinners he'd paid for when her sister forgot her wallet. The way he always carried their coats, poured the wine, beamed at her sister like she was something rare and precious. He deserved to know. He deserved better. Then she remembered something, the house her sister liked to brag about. The one she claimed she bought herself. She'd always whispered it was in her name alone, but she'd heard scraps of truth over the years. We split the deed for the taxes, it's just easier that way. Marital property. Joint ownership. A legal tether she could pull, now that she knew the truth. She didn't want to hurt him, but she'd be damned if she'd let her sister walk away from this with everything she'd stolen intact. If her sister wanted to play games with family, fine. But the next round was going to be hers. She closed the old phone, tucked it in her desk drawer, and wiped her eyes dry. She wasn't 12 anymore, begging her sister to stop teasing. She was a wife now, and no one got to stand at her altar and twist the knife for fun. Not without paying for it. The next morning, she woke up before dawn. Her husband lay beside her, breathing steady, his arm draped across her waist like an anchor. For a moment, she let herself lean into that warmth, the promise she'd made him, the promise he'd made her. Forever. That was the word they'd both chosen carefully, and forever, she knew now, didn't mean letting poison stay at your table. It meant protecting the life you'd built, even from family who'd rather burn it down for their amusement. She slipped out of bed, pulling on a sweatshirt, and went to the small desk by the window. She booted up her laptop, her father's old file folders spread out like puzzle pieces. Somewhere deep in the mess of family photos and recipes she'd digitized years ago, she found it, the scanned copy of her sister's property agreement. She remembered the day her sister bragged about it, tipsy on cheap Prosecco, we split it 50-50. It's just smarter on taxes, you know? Plus, I'd never want to screw him over, he trusts me too much. She'd laughed back then, too polite to ask why her sister always smirked when she said the word trust. Now she saw that smirk for what it was, as a tell, a crack in the mask. She printed out the papers, read every line twice, then picked up her phone. She didn't call her sister. She didn't want to hear the lies, the excuses, the gaslighting that always made her feel like the petty one for demanding basic respect. Instead, she called the notary's office. She'd used them once before for something small, transferring a car title after college. She remembered the notary, an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice like a rusted latch. The type who liked things neat, legal, final. Perfect. By the time her husband woke up, she'd already scheduled an appointment. She brewed him coffee, kissed him on the cheek, and said she had an errand to run. She didn't give him the details, not yet. Not because she didn't trust him, but because this was hers to carry for now. He kissed her forehead and told her, "Whatever it is, you've got this." And she did. For the first time in her life, she felt the truth of that settle deep in her bones. At the notary's, she laid the deed on the table. The notary flipped through it, her thin silver chain glasses sliding down her nose as she read. "So, you want to transfer your share to him?" She nodded. "He's my brother-in-law. He deserves it more than she does." The notary's eyebrow twitched. "Family disputes?" She let out a small, humorless laugh. Asterisk, you could say that. Let's just call it balancing the scales. The notary stamped each page, the ink crisp and final. Asterisk, once this is filed, he'll own the majority share. She can't force him out, and he can push to buy out her part, or force a sale. That what you want? She held her breath for a heartbeat, then exhaled. Asterisk, that's exactly what I want. When she left the office, she didn't feel guilty. She felt steady, like she was stepping onto solid ground after years of letting her sister make her question whether the floor even existed. She got in her car and drove to a quiet park on the edge of town. She sat in the driver's seat, the papers still warm from the notary's stamp. She texted her sister's husband, a simple line, "Hey. I need to show you something. Can you meet me at the notary tomorrow? It's about your house, and her." He replied almost immediately, "Is everything okay?" She stared at his message, fingers hovering over the screen. Then she typed back, "It will be. But you deserve to know the truth." She knew he'd come. He was the kind of man who believed in the small, invisible lines that hold people together. He deserved to know where the cracks really were. Tomorrow, she thought as she tucked the papers back into her bag, her sister would finally understand. You don't invite ghosts to someone's altar and expect your own house to stay untouched. She didn't sleep much that night, but for once, the restless hours felt more like sharpening a blade than picking at an old wound. She lay awake beside her husband, watching the dawn paint faint stripes on the bedroom wall, thinking about all the times she'd let her sister's digs pass with a tight smile. The way she'd told herself, it's just her being her, as if cruelty were a personality trait you just had to accept. She slipped out of bed before the alarm rang. She packed the paperwork in a neat folder, clipped her old phone shut tight inside it, the one that held every message, every cheap betrayal laid out in pixels and dates and cheap bar selfies. She made herself breakfast, even ate half of it, her stomach tight but steady. When she pulled up to the notary's small brick office, she saw him sitting on the front step. Her sister's husband looked like someone who hadn't slept either, dark circles under his eyes, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets like he was bracing for bad news he couldn't yet name. He stood when he saw her, tried to smile. "Hey. You said this was about the house? Did something happen?" She looked at him, really looked, and saw what she'd missed for years. He wasn't just the quiet man trailing behind her sister at parties, paying for the wine, picking up the slack while she twirled through life carefree. He was the one who carried everyone else's weight without ever letting it show. She held out the folder. "I want you to read this. All of it. Before we go inside." He frowned but took the folder anyway, flipping it open right there on the sidewalk. The early morning breeze tugged at the corners of the pages as he read, the property agreement first, then the transfer papers. Then the screenshots. The photos of her sister with the ex, the messages that made his lips tighten into a flat line. When he finished, he looked up, eyes red but dry. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She swallowed, choosing her words carefully. Because I wanted to be sure. And I wanted you to have the chance to decide what you wanted, not what she made you think you had to want. He let out a shaky laugh, half bitter, half broken. She always said you were too soft. Too trusting. I guess she was wrong. She managed a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She's always underestimated me. I guess that's on her. They went inside together. The notary was waiting, her glasses perched on her nose, the stack of papers laid out in perfect order. The office smelled like coffee and old wood, a place where signatures carry more weight than 1,000 whispered excuses. He sat across the table from her. The notary walked them through every page, line by line, in that calm, practiced voice that left no space for questions or regrets. When he reached the signature line, he hesitated, pen hovering over the paper. He turned to her. Are you sure you want to do this? You could keep your half. She can't touch it now. She shook her head. I don't want her house. I want you to have the choice. She took enough from both of us. He pressed the pen down, wrote his name with a firm, deliberate hand. When it was done, the notary sealed it, stamped it, filed it. In less than 20 minutes, her sister's pretty little kingdom shrank to a house she could no longer control. A husband who could now push her out legally if he wanted, and he would. She saw it in his eyes, the flicker of freedom, the same taste she'd carried home from her wedding night. When they stepped back outside, the wind was colder, sharper, like the world had been scrubbed clean. He looked at her, the folder tucked under his arm like a shield. Thank you, he said softly. For telling me. For not looking away. She shrugged, hands deep in her pockets. You deserved the truth. She wanted a show at my wedding, now she'll get her encore. They both laughed, short and breathless, the way you laugh when you've finally pulled the knife out clean. He got in his car, gave her one last nod, not of gratitude, but of understanding. An unspoken promise that they'd both sleep better now, with the doors bolted against the same ghost. She drove home after the notary meeting with the windows cracked open, letting the early spring air wash through the car like a rinse. There was no triumphant music swelling in the background, no firework finale, just the steady hum of her tires on the road and the quiet that came after a storm finally gave up. When she walked through the front door, her husband was waiting at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of tea already made. He looked up, concern flickering across his face. Did it go okay? She slipped her coat off, draped it over the back of the chair, and sat across from him. For a second, she just wrapped her hands around the warm mug, letting the steam rise into her tired eyes. It went exactly how it needed to, she said finally, her voice low but steady. He knows. He has what he needs to deal with her. It's not mine to carry anymore. He reached across the table, covering her fingers with his. He didn't press for every detail, he never did. That was what she loved about him. He knew that some truths were best understood by the weight they lifted when they left your chest. She told him anyway, not everything, but enough. About the messages, the old phone, the smirk on her sister's face when she'd said, I always liked him better anyway. The look on her sister's husband's face when he realized how long he'd been sleeping next to someone who laughed at other people's pain for fun. When she finished, he let out a slow breath. Do you feel better? She thought about that for a moment. She could still see her sister's furious text messages piling up on her phone. How dare you go behind my back? You've ruined my life. You think you're better than me now? She hadn't answered a single one, and she wouldn't. There was nothing left to say. I feel free, she said softly. Asterisk and a little sad, I guess. Not for her, for what I let her get away with for so long. I was so afraid of being the bad guy if I said no. But I think staying quiet just made it worse. Her husband squeezed her hand. Asterisk, you were never the bad guy. You just finally realized she wasn't family the way you deserved. That was it, really. Blood didn't mean you had to stand there and let someone slap you over and over. Family was supposed to be the people who clapped when you rose, not the ones who waited for you to trip so they could feel taller. Later that afternoon, she curled up on the couch under the quilt her grandmother had made, tiny stitches that had held strong for decades, frayed at the corners but never falling apart. She scrolled through her sister's last few frantic voicemails, the insults that dissolved into pathetic pleads, "You can't do this to me. We're sisters. You're all I have left." But she didn't feel cruel for ignoring them. She felt honest. She'd finally told the truth with her actions, and sometimes that's the loudest voice you can have. When the sun dipped behind the trees, she went out to the backyard where her husband was planting spring bulbs along the fence line. She knelt beside him, hands in the cool dirt, the smell of new earth settling deep in her lungs. He looked over and kissed her forehead. Ready to build something new? She smiled, dirt under her nails, sleeves rolled up, her wedding ring catching the last bit of sunlight. More than ready. And when she went back inside, she locked the front door behind her, not out of fear, but because she knew now, you protect what's yours. You choose who gets a seat at your table. You say no to the people who want to drop poison into your champagne and call it family. Her sister had taught her that lesson the hard way. But she'd learned it well. And this time, no one would be standing at her altar with an old ghost in their pocket, not ever again.